Have you ever wondered how we know what we know about psychology? In order to understand, we have to look back over the past 100 years at some of the most influential psychology experiments. Let's start with the Little Albert experiment performed by Watson in 1920. Baby Albert was a happy 9-month-old who was noted to hardly ever cry, but it was found that he was scared of the sound of striking a steel bar. So they would present the child with a white rat and strike the steel bar and make him cry. This was to see if they could condition a phobia, and it was found that they could. Over time, the child was afraid of the mouse even in the absence of the stimuli of the bar being struck, and he was found to be afraid of any white animal, including rabbits, mice, and dogs, and this was even generalized to a fear of Santa Claus beards and loose wool. The unexpected findings in this were that thumb sucking was a fear response in babies. So although this confirmed the hypothesis that phobias could be conditioned, there's no way that this experiment would fly today under today's ethical standards. Next came the Stanford Prison Experiment in 1971. In this experiment, a sample of volunteers were selected from a newspaper ad, and 21 participants were randomly assigned the role of either a guard or prisoner. The guards were trained by a psychologist who posed as a prison warden and taught them which behaviors were and were not acceptable. The prisoners were arrested from their home, booked, strip searched, and made to go through lice protocol while being put into a jail cell. By the second day, the prisoners, who were volunteers and not actual prisoners, staged a rebellion, and a few guards responded with excessive force. The experiment was intended to last 2 weeks, but had to be shut down after just 6 days because of the aggressive tendencies of multiple guards and the mental breakdowns of multiple prisoners. It was found through this experiment that guard aggression was attributed to the natural human response to power, while the prisoners' breakdowns were attributed to natural human response to powerlessness. And although only 3 of the 11 guards were truly aggressive, it was found that the remaining guards eventually became accepting of their aggressive behaviors. The Asch Conformity Study in 1951 aimed to understand just how influential the social pressures were in regards to conformity. One person was put into a room with 7 other people who, unbeknownst to them, were actors. They were then asked a simple question about matching a line to a sample of lines, and the 7 actors responded with an incorrect planned answer. Findings were that 32% of people eventually conformed with the crowd of incorrect answers. Although this shows that more than a quarter of people would conform with a clearly incorrect answer, some critics say that this would not produce the same results in today's age. One of the main criticisms is that this study was done in the 1950s, which was a time period where Americans were expected to conform and that this was a social norm. Between 1961 and 1963, Albert Bandura conducted the Bobo doll experiment, which studied aggression and imitation. 36 boys and 36 girls ages 3 to 6 were graded on their baseline aggression and formed groups of children with similar aggression levels. 24 children were exposed to an adult model who interacted aggressively with a Bobo doll. 24 children were exposed to an adult model who interacted non-aggressively with Tinker Toys, and 24 children were used as control and received no adult model. The findings were that children who witnessed the aggressive model displayed a high amount of imitative aggression towards the Bobo doll when left alone. Females showed more physical aggression if the doll was male and more verbal aggression if the doll was female. Boys imitated more physical aggressions. This experiment proved that children are able to learn social behaviors, in this case aggression, through observational learning. The learned helplessness experiment in 1965 taught us a lot, but warning, if you're an animal lover like me, it may hurt your heart just a little bit. A group of dogs were put into harnesses. Some of the dogs received a shock that they could stop, some of the dogs never received shocks, and a third group received shocks that they could not stop. They were then placed on an electrified floor, and the first 2 groups of dogs quickly jumped over a low barrier to escape the shocks, but the third group did not even try to leave. It was found that the third group of dogs had come to terms with not being able to escape the shocks. A similar study was conducted with rats that had similar findings. A similarity is drawn with elephants. Baby elephants are tied to a stump with ropes that they cannot break because they're too small. Once they are big enough to break the ropes, they don't even try because they're conditioned to believe that they could not. This experiment showed that animals, including people, can just accept their fate because of their trials and do nothing to stop them even if they're able to. Lastly was the halo effect experiment in 1977. 118 college students watched a video of a Belgian man posing as a teacher interacting with his students. Half of the students were shown a teacher behaving politely with his students, and the other half saw him behaving rudely with his students. They were then asked to rate the teacher's physical appearance, mannerisms, and accent on an 8-point rating scale from appealing to irritating. 70% rated the teacher as appealing when he was being respectful, and 70% rated him as irritating when he was being rude. 80% of the subjects rated his accent as irritating when he was being ugly, whereas 50% rated his accent as being irritating when he was being kind. The findings of this experiment were that behavior changes how we perceive a person, and this extends to things like job interviews, first impressions, and celebrity endorsements. In conclusion, we owe a lot of our understanding of psychology to these experiments, and although most of them would not be allowed today due to their abusive or mentally languishing natures, they've taught us a lot of valuable aspects of psychology. Without them, we wouldn't possess the knowledge and treatments that we have today.